All right, welcome to Pro Football First 50 Years, where we take the past and we bring it back to life. Now, I'm strictly talking the first 50 years here, 1920 to 1970. And you can go online, and especially if you go and check out a game from like the 1920s or the 30s, obviously you can find out the box score, who won, who lost, who scored a touchdown, how far a field goal was, somebody kicked, what the attendance was, where the game was played at. You can maybe even find starting lineups for each team, but exactly what happened during the game? Well, thanks to old newspaper articles, we get to take a little bit of a deeper dive into each and every game during the first 50 years of professional football. Now, a little news flash here for you. Ain't no fancy videos or nothing like that going on here. All there is you and me for the next 30 to 60 minutes. So if that's all right with you, let's get it on. And today's game, it's a rematch. Something's got to give. The Pittsburgh Steelers and the Washington Redskins at Griffith Stadium, October 18th, 1959. Now, it was only the fourth game of the season, so it is a bit odd that, they want to play in the same team twice already, but that's the way it was. As a matter of fact, let me show you just in a minute here. The Redskins actually played in the first four games they played. They played only two teams, not so much with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but the Redskins played the Cardinals twice, and then they played the Steelers twice. That's the first four games. As I said, not so much with the Steelers, but 2 weeks prior, the Washington Redskins went into Pittsburgh and won. And the Redskins actually were, at this particular point in time, after three games, are 2-1, and they're tied for the Eastern Division lead. Now, this game here is big for both teams. It's, the Redskins had won two in a row. They're 2-1. They're at the top. They beat the Steelers in Pittsburgh 2 weeks prior. Are they for real? Can they keep the momentum going? And likewise for Pittsburgh, this is kind of scratching their head. They're losing their head. I was like, what's going on here? Because Pittsburgh, I'll show you in just a minute. Pittsburgh opening game beat Cleveland. And Cleveland, with Paul Brown as the coach, was always a formidable force. Then Pittsburgh lost two games, and one of them was to Washington. So they're kind of like, what team are we? Are we the team that beat Cleveland? Or are we the team that lost at home to Washington? I mean, is Washington that good? Or did we just mess up? Are we that bad? Or what's going on here? So let me show you schedules here. All right, share the screen. Let's go to the Washington Redskins schedule here. And you see, the Redskins won two games in a row. They lost their opening game, then they won the next two. And then after this, basically the season's over with. Nothing but a bunch of L's. They would lose. Newsflash, they would get blown out in this game here, 27-6. But then they would just lose every other game. The only game that the Washington Redskins would win the whole rest of the season, the final 9 games of the season, because it was only 12-game schedule back then, they would go 1-8 in the final 9 games. The only team they would beat would be the defending champions and the soon-to-be 1959 champion Baltimore Colts. They would beat them somehow 27-24. Other than that, they lost to everybody else. So it's not a very good season for the Redskins. They wouldn't get any better the following. So actually, the next 2 seasons it wouldn't get any better because they would have back-to-back 1960 and 61. They would have back-to-back 1-win seasons. So things were not very good. Mike Nixon was not a very good coach, as you see here in the next season. Mike Nixon was the coach, and they were 1-9-2. Then the following season, Mike Nixon was gone, but they were 112-1. So with Bill McPeak. So it was not the best of times for the Washington Redskins. Wouldn't be really any good until Vince Lombardi took over in 1969. Then, of course, George Allen would take over in 71. And from 71 to 77, George Allen had them perennial. Every year they had a winning record, and they went to quite a few playoffs. And then Joe Gibbs took over, and they started winning Super Bowls. But with the Steelers, as you can see here, right? I mean, they're always a tough team. As you can see, on the opening day, they beat the Browns 17-7. Then they lost to these Redskins. Then they lost to the Eagles, who were a decent team. Certainly were a decent team back then. They lost, 28-24, lost a tough game. But then, then we got this one here. So this was the big one here. It's like, are we the team that beat the Browns? Are we the team that lost at home to the Redskins, or are we somewhere in between? So after this game was over, both the Redskins would be 2-2, and so would the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now the Redskins, this was, they had to wait a long time to start playing some home games here because they were sharing Griffith Stadium with the Washington Senators, the baseball team, and they were just as bad as the Washington Redskins football team. But you'll notice here, the Redskins played with the 6 preseason games: Kezar Stadium, Memorial Coliseum, Memorial Stadium, Gator Bowl, Bowman Gray Stadium, and Briggs Stadium. Then the first 2 games of the regular season, they played Soldier Field. They played the Chicago Cardinals in Soldier Field, and then they played at Forbes Field where the Steelers play. So it took them finally until almost the midway mark of October before they played a home game. And they played the Chicago Cardinals, and they beat them 23-14. And then, so this would be their second so they played 6 preseason games. This is their 4th regular season game for the Redskins. So out of those first 10 games, they only played 2 games at home. But they were just not a very good team. As I said, this game was played in Griffith Stadium. So let's take a little bit of history of Griffith Stadium, one of those old-time stadiums that just served its purpose and is just sadly not around anymore. All right, let me share a screen here. Go to Wikipedia. All right, here we go. Griffith Stadium. Griffith Stadium stood in Washington, D.C. from 1911 to 1965 between Georgia Avenue and 5th Street. 5th Street was left field. Now, it's tough to see, but it was kind of put on a little bit of an angle between, a little cockeyed, between the streets and all that and everything. The site was once home to a wooden baseball park built in 1891. It was called Boundary Field or National Park after the team that played there, the Washington Senators / Nationals. It was destroyed by a fire in 1911. It was replaced by a steel and concrete structure, at first called National Park and then American League Park. It was renamed Clark Griffith Stadium for Washington Senators owner Clark Griffith in 1923. The stadium was home to the American League Senators from 1911 to 1960 and to the expansion team of the same name for their first season in 1961. I mean, it played many All-Star Game, World Series, Negro League, Homestead Grays played there during the 40s. The Negro World Series was there. The Washington Redskins obviously were there after they transferred from Boston after the 36 season. Ballpark was demolished in 1965. The site is now occupied by Howard University Hospital. March 17, 1911, Boundary Field, also known as National Park and American League Park, was destroyed by a fire started by a plumber's blowtorch. This left the owners of the Washington Senators in a difficult situation. I mean, could you imagine being the plumber? and going up to the owner. My bad. I burned down your Could you imagine? Holy cow. So this left after it was destroyed by a fire. This left the owners of the Washington Senators in a difficult situation. Yeah, I just burnt your stadium down. Yeah. Since spring training had already begun and opening day was less than a month away. Holy cow, what are you going to do? Thomas C. Noyes, president of the Senators, gained approval from the club's board of directors to build a new ballpark with a steel grandstand on the same site as Boundary Field. The quick construction of the ballpark was reported by the Washington Post. Day and night, the chanting of the laborers has been heard in the vicinity. Like Aladdin's palace, the structure rose as if by magic. Opening day 1911, the grandstand was sufficiently stable to host President William Howard Taft and the Boston Red Sox, as well as 16,000 fans. Although the construction of Griffith Stadium continued while the Senators were on the road, it was not completed until a few months later. But, I mean, to get, basically in like less than a month to get a concrete and steel stadium up and stable enough to house a baseball game. I mean, man, that's amazing. Said the wooden ballpark had been laid out with home plate through second base pointing eastward. The new ballpark had the diamond rotated so that home plate through second base pointed southeast. I mean, it was a nice sized park. Left field was 388. Left center was 360. Center field 421. Right center 373. Down the right field line 320. So construction cost $100,000. Wow, huh? This is funny. The Senators' groundskeepers maintained a downhill slope from home plate to first base, supposedly to help accelerate the slow Washington base runners. Oh, my goodness. In the early 1920s, a trend began of fans flocking in great numbers to the stadium to see baseball's rising stars from opposing teams. When the Yankees came to Washington, the chance to see Babe Ruth brought large crowds to the ballpark. But a lot of them were not basically paying, as you see right here. Right field seats and row houses with bootleg bleachers before the high fence was installed. So you see people like on top of roofs and stuff like that, seeing the game for free. And that's not good. You want people coming in and paying. Where are we at? After various other small improvements, on August 21st, 1923, Griffith announced plans to greatly expand and refurbish the ballpark. The stadium, built in 1911, had been hastily constructed and provided minimal seating and other features when compared with other ballparks. The planned expansion was reported to cost $100,000 and expanded the seating capacity to about 35,000. The new seating came from complete rebuilding of the left field grandstand into a deck tier. The new upper section was wider than the old, resulting in a roof line that was considerably higher than the roof of the main grandstand, leaving a visible 15-foot gap between the two. Let's see. Lights were installed in the 1941 season. There's a lot of different things going on here. But we have, and there was obviously a lot of different presidents threw out first balls. Football. Griffith Stadium. Now, you can see right here. I mean, this is the Georgetown Hoyas versus the Quantico Marines at Griffith Stadium in 1923. I mean, just look at all the people, just packed with people. Georgetown Hoyas, they don't even have a football team nowadays. And the Quantico Marines, I mean, the place was packed. Crazy. Griffith Stadium hosted numerous football events before the Redskins moved there in 1937. It was home to the Georgetown Hoyas football team from 1921 to 1950, the Georgetown Washington Colonels football from 1930 to 60, American Terrapins football for one season in 1948. Stadium was host to an annual Thanksgiving Day game between Howard and Lincoln universities. One of the major reasons the stadium early 1920s expansion was that Clark Griffith had envisioned the stadium hosting the annual Army-Navy game played every December. But the Redskins, previously based in Boston and named the Boston Braves in 1932, 1933 to 1936, they were the Boston Redskins. 1937, they moved to Washington and became the Washington Redskins. The Redskins, previously based in Boston and named for the Boston Braves, moved their home to D.C. in time for the 1937 season. As Boston, they had won their division in 1936 and continued their winning ways in Washington, capturing their first NFL championship in that first season. They continued as perennial contenders all through the war years. Yeah, from 1936 to 1945, they were, those 10 years, they were every year they had a chance to make it to the, and actually just pretty much from when the NFL championship game started in the Eastern Division from 1933 to 1946, it was either the New York Giants or the Washington/Boston Redskins went to the championship game. From 1933 to 1946, all those years, 33 to 46, just two teams from the Eastern Division went to the championship game. Nobody else. Griffith Stadium was the location of 1940 and 1942 NFL championship games, and it was exact opposites. The 1940 game, they lost 73-0 to the Chicago Bears, the highest scoring shutout game in the history of the NFL. Championship game in 1942 was essentially a rematch with nearly the same players, and this time the Redskins upset the previously undefeated Bears 14-6. That 1942, now it was the war years. Some teams were pretty much depleted. Somehow, I don't know how, the Bears were kind of like one of those teams that maybe weren't totally depleted, and they had an unbelievable team. They were straight up just killing people. That 42 Bear team, now once again, the competition that they were going against, I mean, was depleted. I mean, the Bears, had maybe lost some guys, but a lot of the other teams lost guys too. So they were beating teams, but once again, it was the war years. Not everybody was at full strength. But that 42 Bear team was undefeated going to that championship game, and they only scored 6 points. During the Redskins game on the afternoon of December 7, 1941 against the Eagles, an announcement was made over Griffith Stadium's public address system commanding all the American generals and admirals there to report to their duty stations. The Japanese attack, obviously on Pearl Harbor, was not explicitly announced over the PA system, with no small portable radios available in the 1940s that left thousands of other spectators to be among the last Americans to learn of the Japanese attack. The Redskins won that game, their last game of the 1941 season, 20-14. They finished the season with a record of 6 wins and 5 losses in third place in the NFL Eastern Division. Although the Redskins enjoyed only one winning record at home, 4-2 in 1956 during their final 13 seasons at Griffith, and they still finished with an 81-58-6 overall record at the stadium over 24 seasons. There's many, many other events. Babe Ruth got knocked out. That's him laying on the ground there. Just a lot of, yeah. So let's go here. Let me, just want to show you some pictures here. Good old Griffith Stadium. All right, where we at? Here we are. The Redskins playing at Griffith Stadium. Good old Griffith Stadium. Here we got one right here. This is that December 7th game. The Eagles played the Redskins at Griffith Stadium. I mean, you can just see the place is just packed with people. There, this is the 1940. This was a touchdown run. I think this might have been after the kickoff. This was might have been like the first play of the game. Touchdown here. 73-0. I mean, just a straight up massacre. Here's slinging Sammy Baugh here. The 1942 championship game. They hosted that. There's the bear right here. Right, enjoying some good protection. What do we got here? Oh, here's somebody colorized that photo. Nice job. Whoever did this did a really, really nice job. Let's see. See it here? Yeah. Trying to show they don't have, because obviously a lot of what the pictures that they have anyway are specifically with baseball in mind here. Trying to show you like a layout of how they had the. Oh, here we go. Here's a great picture right here. Griffith Stadium. If you can zoom in on the scoreboard up here, you can probably see who they're playing. I mean, that could be the Packers, possibly. But that's a great picture there. Got something here you got here. Picture inside of Griffith Stadium. You see the field laying out there. There's not a whole heck of a lot from what I can see. This is a pass here. The guy's trying to haul in a pass from Sammy Baugh. Wilbur Moore tries to haul in a Sammy Baugh bomb in a 27-24 loss. I mean, boy, you can't put. I mean, the guy's running down the field. Can't put the ball any better than that. I mean, tries to hold it in. I don't know if he hold it in or not, but he can't throw the ball any better than that. I mean, Sammy Baugh was amazing, absolutely freaking amazing. Packers Hall of Fame running back, number 3. I guess it was right here, Tony Canadio. The 20-7 win over the Redskins at Griffith Stadium. So you see, I mean, obviously, once they got there, because, Sammy Baugh, I believe his rookie season was 1937. So once 1937 rolled around, and he played for, I think, like 15 years or so, 14, 15 years. He played for quite a while. So, yeah, with him there was always excitement. As I said, from 1936 until 1945, the Redskins were always perennial, powerhouses, shall we say. They always had a good chance of getting into the championship game. So, you can see, I mean, there's always, I mean, right here, I mean, you can see, a lot of people. Sometimes, obviously more than others. I guess it also depends upon who they're playing here. There's right? You can see it once again here. It's just a picture of Griffith Stadium. But you see that, a lot of people. So, of course, during the 50s, they had a couple winning seasons, but I mean, there was nothing. I mean, they won in 42. They had to wait until basically 82 until they won. Their next championship was when they won the Super Bowl. They beat the Miami Dolphins 27-17, I believe it was. So they had to wait a long time in between championship. But Let's see here. All right. So let's start talking about the game here. All right. Now, Coach Mike Nixon, right? He had his worries about this game, shall we say? Obviously there's always injuries and new guys were coming and going into the lineup, but also Mike Nixon was also worried about obviously Bobby Lane. Right? So Bobby Lane is the quarterback in the other team. I'm not saying you got maybe sleepless nights, but all right. So let's go to this would be the October 18th edition of the Evening Star. October 18th, 1959 edition. Redskins and Steelers rated as a toss-up today. So, it was a pick 'em, right? Who are you laying your money on? The surprising Redskins and the disappointing Steelers play a return engagement today at Griffith Stadium with 130. They got the University of Georgia band there. How did that happen? The 130-piece Dixie Redcoats band from the University of Georgia as an added halftime attraction. The kickoff is scheduled for 2:05 p.m. Don't be late. Riding high with 2 victories in 3 games, including a 23-17 upset over the same Steelers 2 weeks ago, the Redskins could project themselves into the Eastern Division title picture. No. But with another win. I mean, they're at home. They'd beaten the Steelers 2 weeks earlier. They're 2-1. If they'd win again, they would be 3-1. It also would be their best beginning to the season since 1946, when the Redskins, coached by Turk Edwards, won 3 in a row after being held to a 14-14 tie by Pittsburgh in the opener. Led by Bobby Lane, though, the rubber-armed veteran of 12 seasons of pro football, the Steelers are hoping to regain ground lost by 2 surprising setbacks by the Redskins and the Eagles. Lane led his teammates to a 17-7 decision over the Cleveland Browns in their debut, setting themselves up as serious championship contenders. The Sporting Gentry called today's match a toss-up. Redskins will show another new but familiar face on defense today, with Tom Bratz replacing Bob Hudson at right halfback. Bratz signed last week after Hudson's dismissal was dropped last year after 2 seasons with Washington. The loss of Ed Meadows because of a dislocated shoulder may hurt the Redskins defensively, although he has an aggressive replacement in Art Gobb. Halfback Jim Podoley and possibly end Joe Walton will be missing on offense. Ed Sutton will replace Podoley, with Dick James moving over to right half. Coach Mike Nixon, calling this a must game for the Redskins, thinks defense holds the key to victory. He fears Lane's long passes and isn't too happy about the return of end Jimmy Orr and defensive halfback Jack Butler, 2 key men who have been on the Steelers' injured list. Coach Buddy Parker also shook up his squad last week, firing defensive halfback Don Bishop and moving Tom the Bomb Tracy from offensive halfback to fullback. All right, so let's go now to the Steelers. Kind of this is a kind of like from the Pittsburgh perspective, this is like a revenge game. So let's go to the October 18th, 1959 edition of the Pittsburgh Press. All right, Pittsburgh Press. I got to find it. There we go. Revenge is on the mind. Steelers hope for revenge against the Skins. Pittsburgh's future to be clouded if Mike Nixon's team wins again, which is true. It's like, man, if we can't beat the Redskins, wow, what the heck are we doing here, right? The Redskins, the Eastern Division's most lightly regarded entry in the preseason predictions, rightfully so, get another chance tomorrow to show their earlier victory over the Steelers was no fluke. The 2 National Football League rivals meet tomorrow at Griffith Stadium in a game that will be televised back to Pittsburgh. Channels 2, 7, 9, and 10 And throughout the South, kickoff is scheduled at 2 p.m. The Redskins won the first meeting of the two clubs, upsetting the Steelers 23-17 at Pittsburgh 2 weeks ago. Steeler fans shrugged off that loss as one of those things and felt for a time that the Steelers would even the count when the teams clashed in tomorrow's return match. But a defeat by the Philadelphia Eagles last Sunday changed the Steelers' picture. The question now is whether the loss to the Redskins was an upset or an omen. A second straight loss to Coach Mike Nixon's 11 would throw a serious damper on the Steelers' hopes for a repetition of last year's fine season. Anything less than a victory would prove costly for Coach Buddy Parker's Chargers. Parker is desperate for a win. His desperation was emphasized in his reaction to last week's game, following which he fired halfback Don Bishop, shook up his offensive unit, and drove the Steelers through the toughest week of drills they have faced since the former coach of the Detroit Lions went to Pittsburgh 3 years ago. The shakeup switches halfback Tom the Bomb Tracy to fullback, assigns rookie Tom Barnett to halfback role, and benches the 215-pound Larry Krutko, who had been the Steelers' number one fullback since the preseason opener against the Cleveland Browns. The move was made, Parker explained, to get more speed into the backfield. Meanwhile, the status of the Steelers' injured players, Jack McLaren, Jack Butler, Darrell Brewster, and Billy Ray Smith, still is not clear. I need to refresh this. All right, here we go. While all are running, none is moving at top speed, and it is doubtful which, if any, of the four will face the Skins. But the Redskins will not be as strong for tomorrow's game as they were for the engagement in Pittsburgh. Defensive end Ed Meadows is out with a shoulder separation, while offensive halfback Jim Podoley is suffering from an injured knee. Several other Skins are nursing bumps and bruises. As he did in Pittsburgh, Nixon will go with Ralph the Googe Guglielmi, the former Notre Dame passer and All-American at quarterback. The Googe, Washington sources say, appears to have hit the peak predicted for him and currently rates over Eddie LeBaron as Washington's number one signal caller. Well, that would not last very long, I can tell you that much. As far as the odds makers are concerned, the game rates is a toss-up. Who you got? I say lay your money on the Steelers. All right, so let's go here to the Evening Star. The October 19th, 1959 edition of the Evening Star. And we'll let the game start here. All right, here we go. All right, here we go. There we go. I mean, this is just Redskins face rocky road after giveaway to the Steelers. We got here. All right. Fullback Larry Krutko of the Steelers carries the ball past Chuck Drazanovich of the Redskins to score in the second quarter of yesterday's game at Griffith Stadium. Standing behind them, looking this way, is quarterback Bobby Lane, while at left is Ralph Felton of the Redskins. This made it 20-6 over the Redskins, who gave the ball away too many times and wound up on the wrong end of a 27-6 score. I say that's Bobby Lane there in the background there. Here's running it in for a touchdown. But, I mean, you can just say how bad. I mean, just minus 13-yard passing breaks a league record. Minus 13. The Redskins fumbled away yesterday's return game with the Steelers 27-6 before a grim-faced crowd of 29,260 at Griffith Stadium. And while they were about it, They wrote a new league record for fewest yards gained passing in one game, minus 13. 7 times they fumbled, and 4 times it was costly. Fumble 7 times. I mean, you can see. I mean, the Steelers had, 187 total yards of offense, 13 first downs. They completed 8 of 15 passes. I mean, you see, the Redskins were good at running the ball. They're passing. They completed 3 of 16 passes. But the biggest boo-boo of all isn't counted in the statistics, muffing a chance to steal an edge in a title race in which most experts pick them to finish dead last. Coach Mike Nixon's men are still up with the pack, tied for second with the Steelers, the Eagles, and the Browns at 2-2. But the pressure was on yesterday, and they didn't react like genuine 14-carat contenders. They left the launching pad like a misguided missile, losing a chance to step out in front of the division with the New York Giants at 3-1. Pittsburgh and the last-place Chicago Cardinals are close to being the patsies of the Eastern Division, and 3 wins in 4 games with them would have been a nice cushion for the bumps ahead. But the Redskins only broke even. The remaining 8 games include 2 games with the Browns, 2 games with the Eagles, and 2 games with the Giants. So they got tough games ahead of them. Then they got to play the Packers and the Colts. So they have an extremely hard schedule going forward. I mean, the Packers, who were pathetic the year before, 1958, they finished 1-10-1, won 7-5 in 1959 since Vince Lombardi took over. So the Redskins have an extremely tough schedule going forward. Off yesterday's performance, I have to be very lucky to hold up to a 500 pace against that group. The only consolation Nixon and his aides can take from the defeat is the realization that the Redskins weren't outplayed. They whipped themselves with some rather amorish offensive football. Fullback Don Bosler gained more ground than the entire Pittsburgh backfield, 136 yards to 134. Fiery Bobby Lane's passes yield only a paltry 77 yards for the visitors, and he didn't connect for a single touchdown. But the Googe had an off day. The Steelers made only one sustained drive all afternoon, marching from their 20-yard line to the Redskins' 35 in the third quarter before Ralph Felton latched onto one of Lane's passes. Pittsburgh didn't move the ball consistently, but it wasn't necessary. The Redskins did it for them, and well. It was 14-0 in the visitors'. All right, so let's go to another page here of the Evening Star, another page in the October 19th, 1959 edition here. Find it here. I got so many. There we go. All right, I'm going to have to redo this one too. For some reason, the Evening Star, it's good, and then if you're not looking at the page, it goes black. So let's see. So the article ended. It was 14-0 in the visitors' favor before the game was 5 minutes old. I mean, 5 minutes old, and it's 14-0 already. Thanks to Redskin errors, another bobble in the second quarter set up Pittsburgh's third touchdown, and Lane booted 24 and 23-yard field goals in the last period for the coup de grace. 2 first-quarter field goals by Sam Baker from the 39 and 30-yard lines put the Redskins on the board and ultimately saved them from the horse collar. Sam's kicks also gave rise to the hope that they might be decisive once the offense got on track, but it was a vain hope. Ralph the Googe, who had an off day at quarterback after two outstanding performances, spent most of the afternoon digging himself out of the turf as the Steelers swarmed on him like bees. Ralph completed only 2 of 13 passes for 9 yards and committed the 2 fumbles responsible for Pittsburgh's early lead. Eddie LeBaron was dispatched to the rescue with the score reading 14-3 and took his mates to the enemy 12-yard line after Gary Glick had picked off a lane pass on the Pittsburgh 38. At that point, Eddie lost control and, after 2 consecutive fumbles, had to settle for Baker's second three-pointer. LeBaron also suffered a severely sprained ankle that prevented him from doing anything thereafter except hold the ball for Sam's place kicks. The injury may keep him out of the Cleveland game. The Steelers came to town obviously prepared to gang up on the quarterbacks and succeeded admirably. Even Eagle Day, making his league debut at the position late in the game, was trampled like a doormat before being recalled to the safety of the bench. The Googe, who had no excuses and offered no alibi for his shoddy performance, lost the ball on the first play of the game. Linebacker George Tarasovic grabbed it on the Redskins' 22-yard line. George was touchdown bound until he, too, fumbled the pigskin on the Washington 8, where it conveniently rolled out of bounds. 3 plays later, fullback Larry Krutko banged over from the 1-yard line, and Lane kicked the extra point. Tarasovic makes it. This sudden disaster shocked but didn't dismay the Georgia Day crowd, and a measure of confidence in the Redskins was restored after the ensuing kickoff when Bosler, Dick James, and Ed Sutton moved the ball to midfield. But on a third down play, Ernie Stoutner jarred the Googe loose from the ball, and Tarasovic again picked it up and took off for the goal line. He made it this time 38 yards away, and Lane again added the extra point. So that was a fumble, I guess a sack, a fumble. The guy picked it up and ran it back for a touchdown, 14-0. Steelers made little headway against a defense featuring Bob Tonoff, Chuck Trzanovich, and Felton, but it really wasn't necessary. Midway in the second quarter, after Bobby Luna punted to James on the Washington 36, the Googe whipped a pass to Bill Anderson, who tried a lateral to Bosler and lost the ball. Jack Butler, back in the lineup after missing 2 games because of injuries, recovered for Pittsburgh on the Redskins 33. Lane's 13-yard toss to Pete Brewster and Krutko's 11-yard run moved it down to the 4. And Krutko took it over from there for his second touchdown. Nixon used Bosler at fullback and Johnny Olszewski at halfback in the second half, hoping to offset the absence of injured Jim Poterley at halfback. But it was a futile effort to get the team rolling. Bosler reeled off gains ranging from 10 to 18 yards, and the Googe once got away for a 19-yard jaunt. But in the end, they had to settle for unsuccessful place kicks by Baker from the Redskins' 46 and 44-yard lines. Sam also missed from the Steelers' 42 in the second quarter. Lane's first field goal followed a fumble by Dick Haley on the Redskins' 35, where he was hit running back a punt. Rookie Rudy Hayes of Clemson scooped up the ball and returned it to the 13, but the Redskin line held there and Bobby had to kick. His second followed Mike Sandusky's interception of the Googe's pass at midfield. This time the visitors reached the 15-yard line before the defense flashed the red light, but it was an easy kick for Lane from the 23. As you can see here, right? I mean, it was still 14-6 after the first quarter. Anybody's game, but all the turnovers that they had, and they just basically handed the Steelers the game. All right. The Googe gets a pep talk from Redskin Chief. The first thing George Preston Marshall did on entering the Redskins dressing room after yesterday's defeat by the Steelers was to give disconsolate Ralph the Googe a pep talk. Reporters didn't hear the confidential advice, but as the Redskin owner turned away from the quarterback, he paused and said, "Remember, Ralph, chin up." Marshall tilted his chin, with a program to emphasize the point. The Googe, who didn't have much help from his blockers, said he probably called the wrong pass patterns in discussing the Redskins' ineffectual aerial offense. From the press box, it looked more like the Steelers had every Washington play blueprinted and knew exactly what to do. The Redskins broke a record they shared with the New York Giants in finishing the game with minus 13 yards of passing. The old record was minus 3. The Giants were stopped with minus 3 in the mud and rain at Griffith Stadium on October 1st, 1939, when they completed 1 of 6 passes. That game ended in a scoreless tie, the only 0-0 ending in Redskins history. The Redskins were held to the same figure by the Steelers November 27, 1955 at Pittsburgh, but they won that game somehow 23-14. The only cheerful note of a perfect autumn afternoon was struck by the University of Georgia's Dixie Redcoat Band. The fabulous Georgettes, 23, and the famous Dancing Majorettes, 8, lived up to their advanced billing and caused a number of eye strain cases in the press box. Eddie LeBaron sprained his ankle in the first quarter when he stepped into a hole trying to cut on a pass play. Could you imagine that? You got your freaking quarterback out there and there's a freaking hole in the field. Wow. There was no apparent swelling after the game, but it was an extremely painful injury, and Eddie aggravated it when he slipped on the steps returning to the dressing room. Wow. He'll be x-rayed today, along with Ed Sutton, his ankle, Chet Ostrowski, a knee, and Don Bosler, ribs. Don Lawrence suffered a slight concussion, but was all right after the game. It was only a partial concussion, that's all. Don Ball, who owned Ernie Stautner in the first game with the Steelers, had Joe Krupke opposite him today, until the latter dislocated his elbow and turned in another big game. Bosler credited the blocking of Ball, Red Stevens, and Jim Schrader for clearing the way for him on his line smashes. Ball said he was to blame for LeBaron's second fumble. I must have hit Eddie's arm and knocked the ball loose, Don said. I don't usually roll out like that. I sort of, explode. But there are some days when little things like that make a big difference, and today was one of them. Line coach Ernie Hefferly Riley observed that giveaway programs haven't been completely abandoned. CBS dropped theirs, he said, but we're starting our own. Although unhappy about the outcome, Coach Mike Nixon of the Redskins was high in his praise of the defensive unit. We made mistakes on defensive against the Cardinals in the opening game. They gave up 49 points, but the past 3 games, the Redskins defense has not been too bad. He said in their opening game they got clobbered, but today the defense played a terrific game and the offense gave it away. It's discouraging when you come out for 3 plays and have to go right back in again. But the defense was as good at the finish as it was at the start. I thought it was just great. Laverne Torgerson, the Redskins' newest assistant coach specializing in defense, also was pleased by the team's performance. They didn't quit, he said. That's a good sign. The talk was mostly defense in the Steelers' dressing room, too. Someone reminded Coach Buddy Parker that his defensive players were responsible for or set up all of Pittsburgh's points. Well, they're on our team, Parker countered. Parker said his linebackers, Rudy Hayes, John Rager, Dick Campbell, and Mike Henry, alternated putting the pressure on the Redskins quarterback. It was more rush than we've ever put on any team, he said. We usually don't rush our linebackers like that. This is the first game I've won in this park since 1937. Wow, in any capacity, the Steeler coach said. And Buddy Parker's been a really good coach. I was playing with the Cardinals, and the Redskins had Sammy Baugh, and we beat them 21-14. Sure, I remember the score. Gaynell Tinsley ran for 3 touchdowns, one of them for 80 yards. For the record, that was the Redskins' second game in Washington after moving from Boston, and left them with a 1-1 record. They went on to win the championship. Yes, they did in the 1937 season. So you see here, we got some stats here. I mean, you can see Bosler had a great game. I mean, my goodness. 18 carries, 136 yards. Whew, wow. Well, Shevsky did good, 5 carries for 46. But the Steelers, Tracy didn't bad. 18, almost 4 yards a carry. That's not bad. Krutko, 5 yards a carry. But just the passing. They must have. Must have been sacked. Lost a lot of yards being sacked. But you can see Lane was only 8 out of 14, but only 77 yards. The pass receiver, they got 3 passes, the whole team. 3 guys caught 1 pass. Grand total, they got 23 yards. So they must have lost 36 yards being sacked. So it was not certainly not a banner day here. That's for sure for the Redskins. All right, so let's go to the Pittsburgh Press. We'll go to the October 19th. I can find it here. All right. October 19th, 1959 edition of the Pittsburgh Press. Defense key to the Steelers' win. Oh, let me refresh this here. All right. Staunton and company ripped through the Skins for 27-6. Fumbles provide necessary lift for weak offense. We got here. No, that's the 49ers. There we go. Pickoff play is made by Redskins Bob Tonoff on Steeler Tom Tracy, who had just made 5-yard gain in the third quarter. And here's the ball right there. All right. In building the Steelers, coach Buddy Parker has attempted to create 2 separate and distinct platoons, one for offense and another for defense. The theory is that one operating independently of the other will develop its own organization, its own tradition, its own esprit de corps, and will therefore be unaffected by anything that happens in the other unit. This way, if the offense has a bad day, it's not going to bother the defense, explained Parker. The defense platoon will still play its own game. Once in a while, it might get lucky and pick up enough points to win a game for you. Parker's foresight paid off at Griffith Stadium yesterday as a crowd of 29,218 watched the raggedy Steeler offense sputter and fume while the defense ripped the Washington Redskins to shreds, 27-6. Captain Ernie Staunton and his 2-fisted cohorts, Mike Henry, Dick Campbell, Joe Lewis, John Rager, and George Tarasovic, I'm going to say maybe, who scored the game's second touchdown on a 38-yard fumble recovery after bobbling away an earlier chance on a similar play, applied unremitting pressure to the Washington quarterbacks, Ralph the Googe and Eddie LeBaron. The purposeful Steelers forced the Skins to cough up the ball on 6 unscheduled occasions, providing the offense with the opportunity to put touchdowns on the scoreboard after drives of only 7 and 33 yards. Quarterback Bobby Lane, who had his first off day as a Steeler by passing for only 53 yards, capitalized on Washington's generosity, sending fullback Larry Krutko barreling over for 2 touchdowns and kicking a pair of field goals from the 23-24. Krutko, who had been a stationary fullback in his last 2 appearances, turned in his best game of the season yesterday, blasting 15 yards and 2 carries for his second touchdown after dancing over from the one for his first. Meanwhile, the harried home forces of Mike Nixon, throttled on all sides by the fired-up visitors, were forced to settle for a pair of 3-pointers from the 30 and 39-yard lines. That merely narrowed the first quarter score to 14-6. The Skins were never in the ball game after that. Even though fullback Don Bosler ran for 136 yards on 18 carries, Bosler's effectiveness was limited to his own end of the field. For only once after the first quarter did the Skins penetrate beyond the Steelers' 40. Wow. Much of the reason for Bosler's running was that Parker aimed yesterday's strategy at stopping the Skins' aerial game, particularly after jumping off to the easy gift wrap 14-0 lead. Red dogging more than they ever did before, the Steelers continually blitzed two linebackers, craftily switching their point of attack from one end of the line to the other. So that they just kept blitzing. And you got to have an answer for that. But it was times were a little bit different back then. I mean, now, obviously nowadays in the pros, you blitz doesn't mean we're going to complete a pass, but if you blitz, we're there to pick it up, and we have obviously what they call, whatever we want to call the hot routes or whatever, right? So if you're going to blitz, in today's game they try to make you pay for it. Back then, they were blitzing. We don't know what to do. So while the stunting linebackers left inviting lanes for Bosler to run, they caused no end of concern to Guglielmi. Unaware which side his harassing foes were coming from, the Googe was kept off stride and obviously rattled. On several occasions, the former Notre Dame quarterback never saw his tackler as he frantically fought to get a pass away. These daring tactics, which limited the Skins to minus 13 yards passing, set a new National Football League defensive record. The old mark was minus 5, established 7 years ago by the Rams against the hapless Dallas Texans. That Tarasovic got those two quick touchdowns, lamented Nixon, crediting Tarasovic with the first score, even though he fumbled the ball out of bounds on the 8-yard line, and that killed us. They started to gamble with their defense. They kept these guys blowing in there, and there was nothing we could do about it. Let's see here. So we got... So they don't... So you can see with the Steelers, they had 13 first downs. Redskins had 12. Yards gained passing, 13. But you'll notice here, here we go. Yards lost attempting to pass. So they had 13 yards gained. That's got to be 12 yards gained, forward pass. I don't know. They lost 13. I'm sorry, they had minus 13 yards. So they must have gained 23 yards passing. They lost 36. So the yards gained by passing the net, that has to be a minus 13 right there. I don't know where I don't know. They didn't put a minus in there. All right, what have we got up here? There's another one up here. Tarasovic fixes grip and fumbles. Krupko sidelined by elbow injury. Big George Tarasovic wasn't trying to be fancy when he fumbled away a chance to score his first touchdown in a 7-year career as a professional yesterday. He merely wanted to make certain he had the ball in his arms when he strolled into the end zone. Tarasovic willingly discussed the fumble that trickled out of bounds on the Washington 8-yard line on the first scrimmage play of the Steelers' 27-6 win over the Redskins. The first play from scrimmage. I didn't get a good grip on the ball when I picked it up, explained the Steelers' 250-pound defensive end. I had it in my two hands, but the ball was setting back on my wrists. When I started to put it under my arm, it slipped right out of my hand. A skeptic in the back of airport limousine disagreed. Don't buy that bill of goods, interrupted a voice. He was getting ready to stiff-arm Krupka. Tackle Joe Krupka was Tarasovic's escort on what started out to be a jubilant 22-yard touchdown, but turned into a frustrating and heartbreaking excursion as the ball trickled out of his arms and bounced over the sideline. But Big George made it up 5 plays later when he picked up his second Googe fumble and raised 38 yards for a score. So like 10 plays into the game after the kickoffs and the extra points, on like 10 plays or so, whatever, roughly into the game, it's 14-0 the Steelers on 2 fumbles. Coach Buddy Parker admits the Steelers were lucky yesterday when a pair of early breaks gave them a 14-0 lead, but he was in no mood to decline the victory. You got to be lucky to win anything in this league, said Parker. You got to be good first, but you're not going to win anything unless you're lucky too. Yesterday's win was another costly one for the Steelers. Krupke suffered a dislocated elbow. Wow. That will sideline him. Early estimates say 5 to 6 weeks. Wow. Oh. An official pulled a boner. All right, there you go. On halfback Dick Albin early in the fourth period, calling the Steeler halfback for holding a pass receiver. On that particular play, it couldn't have been pass interference, for Ralph the Googe, swarmed under by a horde of Steelers, never managed to get the ball away. That technically didn't bother the official, however. Make it a legal use of the hands, he amended. But when referee Bob Austin stepped off the penalty, it was for 5 yards, the penalty for defensive holding, instead of 15 yards, which would have been for illegal use of hands. Owner George Preston Marshall made his regular post-game trip to the Washington dressing room, bubbling over with enthusiasm and suggestions. I want Dick Haley to be ready to play offensive halfback next week, said Marshall to one of the coaches. Marshall made no suggestion as to who would replace Haley in the backfield, a combination that limited quarterback Bobby Lane to only 53 yards passing. I mean, you do that, boy, I'll tell you what, that's pretty doggone impressive. So we're going to go to the October 19th, 1959 edition of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. All right, what we got here? Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Gotta find it. All right. October 19th, 1959. Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Steelers win giveaway from Skins, 27-6. Gifts set up all of the victors' scores. Here we go right here. Oh, there we go. Let's try this again. Redskins halfback Dick James lowers one shoulder as he gets ready to slam into a mass of Steelers on his way to a second quarter first down yesterday. A half dozen flailing arms are shown as several Steelers try to reach out and stop the hard-running James. Giveaways may be going out of style on TV, but the Washington Redskins seem determined to keep them as part of pro football. Coach Mike Tyson's boys, seeking the third straight win, kept presenting the pigskins to the Steelers here this afternoon in Griffith Stadium. The gold and black went on to score, and at the final gun had avenged an earlier loss by the decisive margin of 27-6. A crowd of 29,218 fans came to cheer, but stayed to boo the butter-fingered Indians. For Coach Buddy Parker's Invaders, the triumph broke a 2-game losing streak and evened the season record at 2-2 and provided a perfect buildup for next Sunday's big battle with the New York Giants at Forbes Field. Redskin fumbles led to all 3 Pittsburgh touchdowns and one of the two field goals. An intercepted pass preceded the other 3-pointer. Fullback Larry Krutko carried over 2 touchdowns on 1-yard and 4-yard plunges. And George Tarasovic ran 38 yards with a fumble for the other. Lane's field goals were from 24 and 23 yards in distance. Only points for the losers came on 2 field goals of 30 and 39 yards by Sam Baker. Hero of the win over the Gold and Black earlier in Pittsburgh, he failed on long field goal attempts of 42, 54, and 56 yards. The Parker men kept terrific pressure on the passer so that 3 Redskin heavers, Ralph the Googe, Eddie LeBaron, and Eagle Day, spent a miserable afternoon. Washington tried 16 aerials, completed only 3, had 2 intercepted, and wound up with minus 13 yards net from the overhead game. The winners weren't too hot either, completing 8 of only 15 for a net of 53 yards. Boy, I'll tell you what, that'd be some tough football to watch. Let me tell you what, nowadays game. Outstanding individual player was fullback Don Bosler of the losers, who ripped the center of the Steeler defense to pieces as he ran for 136 yards and 18 carries. Tom Tracy led the Steelers with 68 yards and exactly the same number of tries. Krupka lost to Club. The visitors came out of the game with one of their top defensive linemen injured and probably lost maybe for the season. Joe Krupka, star tackle from Purdue, suffered a dislocated left arm in the final minute of the first quarter. Ooh. The Steelers picked up so we're going to go to the October 19th, 1959 edition. Page 27. Whoops. Oh, there. Steelers picked up Oh, here we go. My bad. The Steelers picked up I do apologize, couple of quick, cheap TDs and had a 14-0 lead before later rivals reached their seats. Could you imagine coming in, you're like 5-6 minutes late for the start of the game, and it's already 14-0 Pittsburgh? It's like, what the happened? The Skins received with James returning Luna's kickoff to the 20. The Googe fumbled on the very first scrimmage play. Tarasovic scooped up the ball and ran from the 22 to the 8. 3 plays later, he didn't run to the 8. The ball slipped out of his hands and fell out of bounds, rolled out of bounds at the 8. 3 plays later, Krutko batted over from the 1, and Lane's conversion gave the visitors a 7-0 lead with only 2 minutes elapsed. Washington kept possession for only 5 plays after the next kickoff. Staunton banged into the Googe, who fumbled. Tarasovic went all the way this time, eating up 38 yards with his long strides. Lane converted for a 14-0 lead at the 5 minutes and 17 seconds into the game. It's 14-0 already. The Steelers got into the fumbling act in mid-period. Tracy let go on his own 28 with Toneff recovering for the Skins. The visitors' defense proved tough, and on 4th down, Baker booted a 39-yard field goal, so it was 14-3 at the 10-minute mark. Glick took a crack at his old teammates late in the quarter when he intercepted a lane pass on the Skins' 35 and hustled to the Pittsburgh 38. This break led to the Bakers' second field goal from the 30-yard line at the 14-26 mark, and the Tribe was back in the ballgame, trailing only 14-6. Midway in the second quarter, Baker was in field goal range again, but this 42-yarder effort sailed wide to the left of the post, so it could have been almost 14-9. Next time they had the ball, the Indians fumbled again to set up the Steelers' third touchdown. Anderson grabbed a pass from the Googe on the Washington 41, then tried to lateral to the pigskin to Bosler. Instead of it dribbled loose, Butler grabbed it up for the Steelers and ran to the 33. Now Lane hit Brewster with an aerial good for 13 yards. A 5-yard offside penalty was called against the Tribe, and Krutko rammed the line for 11 yards. Then Larry plunged over from the 4. Lane converted at halftime. The Gold and Black was out in front by a comfortable 21-6 margin. In the scoreless third period, the Parker men made their only move at the start as they piled up 3 first downs and penetrated to the Redskin 37. But Felton grabbed a lane pass on the home 12 to ruin matters. The Redmen couldn't do much better, and twice they tried almost impossible field goals. Baker booted the first from 54 yards away, but it bounced into the end zone to the right. Then he kicked a 56-yarder, but it fell on the field of play and was returned to the 19-yard line by Derby. 2 more breaks led to a couple of field goals by the winners in the last quarter. Haley's failure to hold a Luna punt enabled Hayes to get the ball on the Redskin 13. Stalled by the Tribe defense, Lane booted a 24-yard field goal, and it was now 24-6. Late in the period, the red shirts were threatening, but Henry got in front of a gooch pass on his own 25 and went roaring to the Redskins' 49. 9 plays later, Lane sent a 23-yard field goal through the post, and Rooney U had regained the victory trail by a score of 27-6. So it was not it's not a, I mean, just goes to show you, back then in the day, turnovers were just, you do stuff like, especially if you're like a rookie or somebody who hasn't really established himself, and you fumble the ball nowadays, like in a game, man, you might be on the sideline for the rest of the game. Some guys, man, if you're that unproven, you fumble once or so, you might, dude, we'll put you on the practice squad and hoping somebody takes you. Because you're not going to play for us ever again. Just goes to show you, the big difference in, turnovers. Obviously they happen. It's football, but the amount of turnovers back then as compared to what they are nowadays. But it's true. As you can see, turnovers either, most of the time, either they cost you. Either they take points off the board for it because either you're driving, you get down into the other team's territory and you got maybe chance at least maybe a field goal try or something, and you turn it over. So it maybe costs you points. Or, as it did in this case, quite often, it then was directly turned in. One time was picked up for a touchdown. But the other one ran back to the 8-yard line. If the ball didn't slip out of his hands, the guy would have had 2 touchdowns. The defensive end would have had 2 touchdowns in the first 5 minutes of the football game for the Steelers. So it goes to show you turnovers are huge. But, in the end, the Redskins were just not a very good team. The Steelers were, certainly a better team, and they're certainly better coached. Buddy Parker is a much better coach than Mike Nixon was. But so after this game, the Steelers got their revenge, and both teams were 2-2. The Steelers would keep, would hang around where they would fall short. They would not wind up. Obviously, the Giants would have the best record overall in the NFL at 10-2, and they would go to the championship game. But at least the Steelers kind of hung around, at the 500 and finishing over 500. The Redskins, this is like the beginning and end. They were 2-1 before this game. Now they're 2-2, and they would finish the season 3-9. So that's the way it was on this date, October 18th, 1959, as the Pittsburgh Steelers played the Washington Redskins at Griffith Stadium. Pro football, first 50 years. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.